to another episode of the CESLC Insider, where our goal is every Wednesday for you to tune in at 12, where you can find education on topics that matter to you. I'm your host, Angelique Jackson, and I'm the Manager of Business Development and Marketing here at Charles E. Smith Life Community. And we're going to have a powerful discussion on the power of words. Joining me today is Susan I Wranik. She is author, professional speaker, clinical activist, and speech-language pathologist. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the honor. I'm happy to share my material with you.
So I just want to talk about, I've read your book, I've watched your TED Talks, and I want to know what inspired your love for words and communication.
Oh, my. Well, I've been speaking since I was 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I have a clip that I use in my programs, me on the phone at 2 in full sentences. My mother worked very hard to help me develop speech at a young age, and then spent the rest of her life trying to get me to stop talking. Language communication is so important. It's everything in the world is the result of communication, good or bad. It's how relationships are born, how business is done, how wars are started, how peace treaties are drawn up. Everything is the result of communication, mm-hmm. good or bad. So it's an important element, and we can all be better at it.
Right.
Present company included.
Now, you worked for many years as a translator or interpreter for the Italian government. How did that expand your understanding of language and communication? Okay, first, by way of clarification, and I really should do this because the media doesn't always have it straight. A translator writes, an interpreter speaks. It's my understanding to be a certified interpreter, you have to have proficiency, mother proficiency, native proficiency in 3 languages in order to be certified. I do not have that. My language was Italian, and the other one was modern Greek, but not mother proficiency. Translators write, and in fact, I was hired initially so I could render the Italian in English in writing, although clearly when you're in an environment where people are speaking another language, you are going to be speaking that language too. At that end, then I worked with 128 other languages because I was under contract to the Italian Ministry of Defense. So that was a wonderful opportunity to watch other people. You learn so much more. Everything in life is relative, and you learn so much more about the world and about yourself when you watch others. Wow, that's pretty powerful. So you spent a lot of years as a translator. What made you transition to healthcare?
Well, I had done what I could do. That was never intended as a career position. I was the only female American civilian in an all-male military environment. At that point, toward the end, I think the Italian Armed Forces were one of the last armed forces to admit women.
Wow.
One of the very last. But I was not a national. I had nowhere else to go. Mm-hmm. So it was such a good time. And it was a unique, and there will be a book coming out on it, I can assure you. It was time. I wanted to have a career. I wanted to know that if I was back in the day, you looked in the paper for jobs, and I wanted to know that my position was listed in the paper. And so I was always intrigued by medicine. I was going to go into law. My father wanted me to go into medicine, and I saw the famous white coat when I was working on my first master's in Italian. And I said, what does she do? And they said, I think she's a speech pathologist. I said, that's what I want to do.
So that's it.
I wanted to learn more. I thought it would give me an avenue, an opportunity to bring my talents together mm-hmm. in language. Speaking other languages is great, but it's only good if you can do something else in them.
Yeah.
So it's important to have a skill set. I was interested in the medical side. I wanted to be able to help people. In this particular case, I was particularly interested in swallowing, because that's what the woman in the white coat was doing.
Right, sure.
And I thought, I would like that. That would get me close to medicine, probably as close as I could be. So that's what I ended up going into. I got my second master's in speech-language pathology,
Mhm.
and I specialize in neurogenic communication disorders. That would be communication, swallowing, cognition, related to Parkinson's, stroke recovery, the dementias.
So
ALS.
very focused expertise.
Right, I just take it to the next level. It's all about communication.
All about communication.
Mhm.
Now, you refer to yourself, which I love this term, as a clinical activist.
Mhm.
Can you tell our audience, what does that mean to you, and how do you embody that spirit in your practice every day?
Oh, my. Thank you for bringing that up, and I do like that term, clinical activist. Things need to be said, and they're not often said,
Mhm.
not often enough. And in almost any field, there's a challenge in communication. As we know, it's particularly challenging in the medical field because there's so much information to share with people. But I'm a firm believer, and if you've read Atu Gawande's book, Being Mortal, and Kalanithi on When Breath Becomes Air, they both say, and people writing in the field, others writing in the field say the same thing, that medical care is more than the prolongation of life. We tend to forget that it's all about the quality of life.
Okay.
And I feel that it is incumbent upon all of us as clinicians, which is a term we use for physicians and therapists, and it's the general term. It's imperative upon us not only to treat and diagnose, the physicians diagnose. It's not about medical treatment, diagnosis, and medication management. We have an obligation. It's incumbent upon us to educate and empower those we serve so that they can make an informed choice and they can be more proactive and take an active role in their health care.
Sure.
And there's not enough time. People don't ask questions because they don't know what to ask, so we have to share that information and present the scenario, and I think we have to do a better job at that.
Do you have any solutions, or can you give us some examples of how a clinician would be able to better communicate?
It's
With the
the
one we
words,
serve.
the words you use for starters, you use analogies, break it down, make sure people understand.
Mhm.
I don't know what the time is, I think it's like 13 minutes now for a medical visit, I may be wrong. You can't possibly do what you need to do. We're putting such pressure on our physicians to
Right.
deliver services, to understand these people. I mean, most people take more than 13 minutes to undress and get ready for an exam, and it's very, very difficult. We expect our medical staff to do way too much.
Way too much.
Way too much, and we have to be more responsible. The days of going in to see a physician saying, "Doctor, I'm sick, heal me," are over. An informed consumer remains the best customer. We need to know, and I don't mean Google smart and listening to everything that you find on social media, but learning about your symptomology, keeping track, keeping a record, and being guided. For example, I do a lot of work with people with Parkinson's. I do a lot of work with swallowing. And people will call me in very often. Their words, and I'm sure we'll discuss this, but one of the words, people don't talk about end of life. I don't use end of life. I use closing the circle of life for starters.
Closing the circle of life.
Closing the circle of life. And it should be a celebration. Because after all those years and all the contributions and everything these people have done, each individual has done, we should be celebrating who they are.
Yes.
Where none of us is getting out without this. It's the end that awaits us all, but it's the final chapter and the book of life, and we must do a much better job of helping people write that final chapter, having things arranged the way they want. That's why we have hospice. Bad name for a wonderful organization, but we've made it a bad name because we've sullied it. We have a way of, it's a linguistic thing. Terms can become specific or they can become generalized.
Okay.
And sometimes we sully the word hospice, which is, it's the closest thing to death with dignity. But it's not just about death, it's about planning your whole life.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be morbid, but for example, when people will call me in if somebody's not eating,
Mm-hmm.
and I will go through my evaluation and I'll let them know what I'm finding, but I always explain to them what are my three phases of eating, the can't, the don't, and the won't. And I will explain what happens at each level so that people can be prepared for it. Because if you wait until you need the information, it's too late. Because people are going to be in a panic mode. You know how it goes. We've all been there. You're chaining questions. You're not waiting for the answers. You're certainly not processing, and you're in no position to weigh things.
Right.
Because you're under stress, and you know you've got to make a decision. And then if you've got a pending discharge, we won't even go into that. But people just can't possibly be prepared. Not everyone can go to medical school in order to maintain and manage health care for themselves, let alone other people. And so, to the extent that we can change information and make things more palatable, present it in words and in a scenario to which people can relate, I think that is my feeling. I don't think, that is my feeling about what being a clinical activist is. Does that answer the question?
I think it answers.
I feel a little passionate about things.
I can tell passion.
If you're not passionate, it doesn't matter.
So,
all right.
I can feel the passion, I definitely can. And since we're on a high, passionate note, I want to reference your TED Talk, The Power of Words.
Oh, the power of words.
The power of words. And of course, you obviously say that words are powerful, but why? Where does this power come from?
Okay. Words count because they condition. They condition how we act, how we react, how we cause others to think, act, and react.
Okay.
And the most important words that we use are the words that we use with ourselves. For example, if you say, I can or I can't, either way you're right.
Right. So
What do you want to be right about?
I want to be right about the positive.
Exactly. And we do know that people who are positive, and I know the coaches will love this, because we know, we have research, medical research that substantiates this, that people who are grateful, people who are positive, are healthier people. They live longer and they live better lives, better quality lives. So it's important. Nobody wants to be around the negative. They have the concept. Have you heard of the heliotropic effect?
No.
Okay.
Can you
Helios from the sun, sure. Like I wouldn't. Helios from the Greek word, from meaning the sun. It's the tendency of living organisms to follow the sun. Sunflowers are the best example of that. But the tendency to follow light source, and not only a light source, but a positive source.
Sure.
Who wants to be around, consciously, who makes a decision to be around people who are negative?
No.
And it can have an adverse effect on your health. Sometimes there's just the sheer will to survive, and I'm sure the viewing audience, the listening audience is aware of this. We all know people. I know animals that have survived as well because of the sheer will. They wanted to wait until the owner came back so that they could spend the last few moments with them. People have survived all odds. People who were told they never walk again, they never talk again, they're walking across the stage at graduation. Never underestimate the power of one. Words are important.
Words are important.
They are important.
And so you touched on a subject what I was going to kind of discuss later on, but when you said the words that we use to speak to ourselves.
Yes.
And I have a copy of your book. I did read it. Don't forget to say thank you. But unfortunately, right before this, we were stuck in the elevator, and I didn't bring it. But I did write down a quote, and that made me think of how we speak to ourselves. And it says, changing our words can indeed change our world. And I thought that was so powerful. And then when you just discussed, the choice of words that we speak even within ourselves, and that really, that phrase really hit home to me, just being kind in the way that I speak to myself. I think it just starts with us.
There's always a nice way to get your point across. That's a quote from the book. That's my mother talking to me. She would say, Susan, there's always a nice way to get your point across. Your job is to find it.
Yes.
And I think I mentioned in the TED Talk, I talked about this example of a gentleman who was out with his cup collecting money or attempting to collect money, and he had a sign. He was blind. It was probably someplace in Europe because of the piazza, and people were walking by, as people want to do. And with regard to words, I just want to deviate a second. One of the worst things you can do, whether you choose to give money to people on the street, whether you support them, whether you think it's inappropriate, whether you question who's behind them, the fact is the worst thing you can do to anybody is to make them invisible.
Oh, yeah.
And words don't cost a thing. You don't have to give people money. You can turn around and say, how is your day going?
Right.
How's business? You can, I hope you have pleasant weather.
Right.
It looks like rain, I hope you stay dry. There's a way to have people involved and to make them feel that they matter.
Sure.
It doesn't cost a thing to be kind. Another quote from Mother. But this young lady came across, and this gentleman was collecting money, and nobody was stopping to talk to him, as often happens.
Right.
You see that in the metro. And this young lady came walking up to him, young professional woman, on her way to a meeting, and he reached out to tactily identify her. He touched her feet. He could sense her, smell her perfume.
Mm-hmm.
And she greeted him. She borrowed his sign for a moment with permission. She scooted it over and wrote something on it and handed it back to him. They set it up. And with that, she bid him farewell. A couple hours later, she came back after the meeting and saw that there were people milling around. Everybody was milling around. They were talking to him, and they were giving him money. They were engaging him and so forth. And she stopped. She walked up to him. He recognized the footstep. He touched her shoes and realized that it was the woman that had been there before. And he said, you're the lady that was here earlier. What did you write on my sign?
Yeah, what did she write?
And she said, I said the same thing you did. I just changed the words. He had written, I'm blind, please help. She had written, it's a beautiful day, but I can't see it.
Wow.
It's a lovely way. There are things that every day we have an opportunity to draw people to us or to push people away.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes with the words that we use. And if you give a smile away, I think three of the most powerful words, somebody said this to me before I got up to give a talk at a conference. This was a medical conference with the top movement disorder specialists in the area, 800 people at this conference.
Wow.
And I had been given very strict instructions, we all had as speakers, that we were supposed to have, the light print and the dark background, so I dutifully followed every, check. And I walk into the ballroom, they've got two jumbotrons with slides up that looked like they had been designed by DreamWorks, by Steven Spielberg. And the doctors are conversing among themselves, I know them, and they could see the color drain from my face.
As you looked out in the crowd.
And they came to me, and one of my colleagues said to me, so what's the matter? And I said, light print, dark background, what happened? And he said, you know this stuff cold. And I said, yeah, but I can't compete with Spielberg.
No.
And I was so unhinged.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And nervousness is not a bad thing. It keeps you on your game. But the people around me, my colleagues could see that I was more unhinged than usual. And as I called my name and I went up to the stage, one of my colleagues, the one who was seated in front of me, was hurriedly writing a note. I'll never forget this. And she turned around and she looked at me and she tossed it over like an 8th grade note pass, right? And as I'm walking up to the stage, I open this note and she's got, you got this.
Ooh.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
If you could say that to people, I mean, how much you can encourage people just by saying, you got this.
You got this.
Yeah. And everybody should find the time in a day to tell somebody, give them a you got this moment.
I like that.
So it's all about the share. And when you're dealing, especially in healthcare, it's so important to keep people buoyant. A lot of people who are older aren't mean. They're ill,
Mm-hmm.
and they're sore, and they hurt, and they're in discomfort. It's our job, our responsibility, it's our gift to be able to touch them and emotionally touch them
Mm-hmm.
and make them feel better. We're not always there to cure what ails them, but we can make the day a brighter day. And each day we have an opportunity to make a person's day a little bit better in the words we use.
And giving them a gift.
It's a gift.
Well,
What else would you like to know?
what else do I, so in that, one of your TED Talks, you did mention the power of words again. You discussed one of the fears that you have in your lexical world, which is with every statement, there is a positive, a negative, and a neutral way to make that statement. Can you share with us some examples of statements and ways that we probably sabotage our communication every day? Maybe just a few.
The neutral way would be Joe Friday, just the facts, okay? And other ways you can say, I don't want to do that. And it's not just what you say, it's how you say it and how you move when you say it. And this is particularly true when you're dealing with people in a medical environment.
Mm-hmm.
It's the words as they're put together, as you choose them. It's how you look and you communicate so much before you even open your mouth.
Body language.
And not even body language, just a still picture. You can look at somebody. You don't even have to see them move. It's inbred. It's an Olympic system, one of the oldest parts of the anatomy. It's our fight or flight response. We look at somebody and we know what we perceive, and different people perceive danger differently. Different expressions, different facial expressions. Not everybody likes every person. People have different tastes. So it depends upon how the person is dressed, how the person smiles, what they laugh at, how they move. But it starts long before they even move. It can be, as I said, a picture, and you can decide, I don't like that person. It never ceases to amaze me how everybody has an opinion on some people with whom they've never even been in the same city, let alone in the same room. But everybody has an opinion.
Especially with celebrities, right?
Indeed, and politicians, and absolutely. It's not a bad thing because it's a part of our defense mechanism, but when we're judgmental and we're not willing to alter that, we all make snap decisions. I play a game with myself. I'm on a number of boards in a number of groups, and not everybody gets along real well. They're not, I don't want to say they don't get along. Not everybody is best of friends.
Right.
And there's a difference between being intimidated and being intimidated.
Okay.
Okay.
Share.
And, well, I think I tend to be intimidated, but that's on me, it's not on the other person.
Right.
But then I ask myself, why don't I like that person? I don't like that person because I'm intimidated. Why am I intimidated? How can I change that?
Mm-hmm.
And my greatest joy is when somebody I previously thought I didn't care for turns out to be a best friend. And sometimes it can happen so simply when somebody turns to you and said, thank you so much for that recommendation you gave me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that info. And I didn't know. I didn't know that helped. Yeah. Oh, it was great. I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think, I was wrong. And when you can admit that you're wrong, that's the growth angle. With regard to speaking up and speaking down, there's a nice way, there's a neutral way. For example, with regard to my mother was almost 5 feet,
Mm-hmm.
almost, as opposed to not quite,
Right.
or as opposed to saying 4 feet 11 3/4.
Oh, that's very specific.
All right, my mother was 4 feet 11 3/4. My mother was not even 4 feet. That's negative. My mother was
Mhm.
almost 5 feet.
Okay.
So there are ways to focus on the positive and focus on the things that we can do and not the things that we can't. Nobody cares what you can't do. Nobody cares what you haven't done. They care about what you can do, and that's what we have to celebrate.
Yeah.
So everybody, when people look in the mirror, when I'm working with women frequently, my answer to them is always, you have to get yourself a bigger mirror.
And so why?
Well, so that they can see all the beauty, all the quality, and it's not just women, it's men as well. The difference between men and women is that men don't always admit it, but they feel and they hurt, and there's intimidation there as well.
Mhm.
They just are not as vocal about it.
Very
So
more stoic.
we have to help one another.
Yes, we do. So I was taught a phrase a long time ago when I was a child, and so this conversation, this discussion opens my eyes a little bit because I don't know if anybody remembers, sticks and stones may break my bones,
Mhm.
but words will never hurt me. And
Mhm.
so this discussion with you and in my experience and everybody else, that's simply not true.
No.
I mean, the sting of the word stays with you much longer than, you know, it was expressed. And it's just very powerful, you know.
There's another expression along those lines, don't be upset by anybody who's not in a position to change it.
Okay.
Something along those lines. I don't recall. Words hurt, but one has to learn how not to take everything personally and to consider the source. You know, for every one saying, there's a corollary that's, you know, on the other side is bookends or opposites. It's important not to take everything that everybody says personally.
Right.
Sometimes it's on them, and they're maybe just unhappy. You know what they say, smile to the mean people, because they're the ones that need it the most.
I like that.
And sometimes it's important to extend a word of kindness, and it can cheer people up, it can thaw that ice.
Yes, it could. A kind word goes a long way.
It does, it does.
So I want to switch gears here a little bit, and we already, we touched on it a little bit, communication and healthcare. And in one of your TED Talks, you talk about the most important words in rehab: want, can, and will.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
And those are actually three of the most important words in anything in life.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do anything if you don't want it, and I don't mean just want it, oh, I want this, I mean, you really want to get better. And when you're working with people in rehab, you have a limited time frame, and they're not furniture. You can't just move them around and perform on them. They have to be vested. It's how you approach that. You have to encourage that want to help them understand that they have choice.
Mm-hmm.
But choice comes with consequence. And paint the picture and help them understand. And I would joke with people all the time, and they'd frequently say, I don't need speech. And I'd say, we haven't seen the menu yet. And they'd laugh, and I'd say, you know, it's all included, it's not a la carte. And I said, you're entitled to this, okay? And they said, well, what you got? And I'd say, well, and I said, it's not just speech. And I said, we do memory. Memory? And I said, yeah, you have difficulty with, yeah. And I said, okay, we'll put that on the list, that's a possibility. And I'll say, how is swallowing? Do you have any problems coughing, swallowing? It's not that I'm trying to sell a bill of goods. I'm trying to make rehab an experience. I would use memory sequencing. I'd say, you know, every day in rehab is like school. And I said, they're classes, and you're being graded by whom? And I said, by everybody. And I said, and it determines if you go home, when you go home, and how you go home. And the eyes get real big. Suddenly I have attention. And I said, you want me to teach you what the classes are? And they go, yeah. And if you can make it a learning experience, and they feel that they're in charge, when you're in a situation like that, when you're ill, you feel that you've been stripped of power. Empower. You have to give that power back. So then they understand, and they know what the parameters are, and then you explain how you're going to go about it. So then they understand that they can, that it's imminently doable.
Of course.
And then you see them will. They're in it to win it. And it's a great feeling to get people to do that. You want me to share some of the words I use in healthcare, I think that are really important?
Please.
Okay, one of the biggest things, and this is for everybody with regard to memory, for those of you who are using Senior Moment, it doesn't exist, there is no such thing. So I implore you to use the phrase GMAM, give me a moment.
GMAM.
Give me a moment, because give is strong, and it reduces that cortisol rush and that adrenaline rush. Cortisol can be corrosive to the hippocampus, your brain, all right? And when it's produced in excess, which it is under stress. So when people ask you a question, don't be so quick to say, I don't know, I forget, I can't remember, because it destroys the conversation. You'd be surprised how affirming give me a moment is. It will come back to you, and it doesn't come back immediately because there's so much up there.
Right.
And it takes a while to access those files. Even the computers can't get to them, so that's one of the things. And with regard to healthcare, I tell people, they'll say, well, we allow our residents, we allow our patients. Why don't you encourage? Why don't you provide opportunities?
Yes.
It makes such a difference, just changing the words, okay? I know a woman who had ALS, she was visiting one of the clinics. We were going to do a play about this. We laughed so hard. She walked in and they said, "Have you fallen yet?" And she looked at me and she says, "Is there a deadline? Did I miss it? Did I not check that box? You know, is there something I should have done?" And she was just being humorous.
Right.
But why would you say that to somebody, "Have you fallen yet?" That's not even the question. The question is, are you experiencing any falls?
Right.
Have you fallen yet? And Dr. Bill Thomas talks about yet and still. He despises those words. You know, are you driving? Are you still driving?
So yet.
Kind of like, have you fallen yet? Are you still driving? So
Yeah.
those can be so limiting.
Right.
So we have to use them with caution. One of my biggest concerns is with hospice care and with end of life and closing the circle of life. People will talk about starvation and they'll talk about people forgetting to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to go on record as saying that people, as they close the circle of life, never, ever, ever starve. Okay? We've got to eradicate that word. What happens is people cycle down. They don't need that food as much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I refer to it as a packing. They're packing. They're sorting out their luggage, their legacy. They're deciding what they want to take with them. You don't see people closing the circle of life struggling. There's a calm until we come in and get them excited. Okay, but the body has a tremendous ability, left to its own devices, to mitigate pain before we come in. Which is not to say we shouldn't be there, but don't use the word starvation, please, and don't worry about it. I'm concerned when people speak and they talk about kind of, sort of, so to speak, if you will.
Oh my, that's a mouthful.
Kind of, sort of, what, et cetera, if you will, so to speak. If I will, what? You know, those empty phrases, they cause me to be very uncomfortable as a listener. But I smile and try to be encouraging, all right? And, of course, the L-Y words.
L-Y.
Basically, essentially, fundamentally, which basically, essentially, fundamentally, don't add anything to a conversation. They just take up space, and they weaken the discourse. It's important to choose the words carefully. Less is more.
Less is more. Why do you think people use those filler words?
They're fillers. It's a nervous rut.
Mm.
We all have nervous ruts. I have verbal ruts too, that I'm not sure I'll go back and listen to this and think, oy. Because we can all be better. We can all be better at what we do. But when it comes to conversation, as I say, and to communication, communication is defined as an exchange of information.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always exchanged. And sometimes you have to go back and check with the listener, because the listener is the person who determines the success of your communication. Doesn't matter how hard you work on it if the message isn't delivered. And especially when we're dealing with people who are frail, people who may be ill, it's particularly important to listen to what they don't say.
Okay.
The loudest sound in the language is a well-placed silence. Think about it.
And some of us, myself included, are so uncomfortable with those silences.
Western culture is uncomfortable with silence. I do programs and I talk frequently about the difference between communication and communion.
Oh.
Communication, it's Martin Buber, he's a rabbinical scholar and a philosopher, and he talked about, we know that communication is an exchange of information, but communion is the concept of being one with, just being one in essence with that person. And it's a luxury that can only be experienced between or among people who are extremely close, like mother-daughter,
Mm-hmm.
Father-daughter, mother-son, spouses.
Mm-hmm.
You know you can achieve communion when you can just be together and you don't feel that you have to fill every space with words. Nervous chatter.
So when you can just be.
Just be. And very often, when I'm counseling and consulting with family members for other family members who may have aphasia, may have difficulty expressing themselves, not only finding the words. If they can't find the words, they also have difficulty deciphering the words that are spoken to them. But the importance of tactile stimulation, fragrance, touch. Touch is so important, and that's so communicative. The lips, I would say the mouth is the first and the last frontier. It's the way by which babies explore the world around them, and it's the last decision people ever make, to swallow or not to swallow, because nobody can make you swallow. So that is the way by which we show affection. We kiss.
That's true.
Right?
Yes.
Even people think they're animals.
It's a lot of love.
So, and the three worst words, the danger words, these are the danger words. That's the way it's always been done.
Where do you hear that a lot?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the way it's always been done. They're frightening. That's the way it's always been done, an unwillingness to embrace. But I recall my mother's words. There's always a nice way to get your point across. Speak simply, less is more. I hope you find these beneficial. I hope you all can use some of these things. Give me a moment. Everybody, please use give me a moment. And you don't have a senior moment anymore. And these are trademarked, by the way. You have an MRD. Okay?
MRD?
An MRD. That's a momentary retrieval delay. Don't you love it?
I absolutely
Talk about
love
finding
it.
the right words, okay?
MRD.
MRD, trademarked.
Love that. Thank you so much. I guess we can get to some questions now, right? The fun part.
Happy to do so.
Okay. So, Marie is asking, where do you start when you are assessing where the client is, and what do you look for, et cetera, that might set the stage for how you approach that person?
I try to find as much information out about the person as possible. I start on eye level with a smile. I always start with a smile. That's the first thing I look for. Do they? Will they? How long does it take? And what will prompt a smile? That's my first concern. And then I try to get to know them. I don't go rushing in with all the, I have a very different approach to treatment. I try to get to know that person because each individual is different, and then you work from there. And you're not going to find it all out in 13 minutes, in an hour. It takes a while to get to know that person, to get to know what the likes and dislikes are. I always try to get a little bit of a history beforehand, so I know what the person did previous to our meeting.
That was a great question. Thank you, Marie. We have another question. Do you have any tips for communicating with loved ones who have dementia?
I have lots of tips. I have lots of tips. And I also have a book I've been working on, a program called Travels with My Aunt, which I deliver frequently. Remember that when someone has dementia, we have to go to their world because they can't come to ours, but we will always, always be visitors in their world, and we must conduct ourselves accordingly as such. It's not always important what you say. Work for the smile. Work for the smile. It's all about quality of life. It's about quality of life, it's about choice, it's about purpose. I would focus on the smile. Don't worry about giving them so much information. And I've consulted with family members, and it pains me because they want so badly to share every soccer score for every grandchild with the person who, unfortunately, does not remember the day or date. But he or she may be smiling because the sun is shining. So you work on the tactile approach. And feel free to contact me privately. I'd be more than happy to consult with you and give you some suggestions. Concentrate on the movement with which you engage people. Children, animals, and people with cognitive shift are very sensitive to the world around them. The speed with which people move, they know if you're in a hurry, they know if you're angry, they know if you're stressed and upset, they can pick it up. They weren't born yesterday, they've lived a life too, and they're in there even though they can't always organize things sequentially the way we would.
Mhm.
So focus on the smile first and foremost, and take it from there. Find out what they enjoy doing. Somebody asked me, everybody needs to have something that they, someone they love, something that they enjoy doing, and something that they look forward to. You can tell if they love and if there's affection. You can tell if they relate to you. They don't have to be able to tell you that.
Mhm.
It may hurt you because they can't call you by name, but they know who you are. They know that it's a positive charge, and that's all that matters. And your job is to be able to make that enough to continue to help them smile. And they should have choice in what they do, not just busyness, but something that they enjoy.
Okay.
And they may not know to look forward to it, but if it's presented as a choice, I do a lot of work with adults who are intellectually and developmentally differently abled, not disabled, they're differently abled. They do things, they just do things differently.
Mhm.
And it's very important to provide that opportunity to choose.
It's very important, the power of choice, empowering them to choose.
Absolutely. And never reason with anybody with dementia, all right? Behavior is communication, and if they were able to reason, they wouldn't have dementia. All right, that's by definition. They're losing the memory that they had, the experiences that they had, which enables them, they can always tell you yes or no.
Mhm.
What they are not able to do, this is a very important distinction. People with dementia can tell you yes or no. They can indicate what they want or don't want to do, and they can be obstinate when they don't want to do it. What they cannot do, like driving, is they're not in a position to weigh the consequences. What we say in legalese is they're unable to weigh the benefits and the risks. That's a very important distinction to make with family members when people are working on retiring from driving as opposed to taking away the keys. Change the word.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Retiring from driving.
I'll give you another example. I worked for, I took care of my aunt for 20 years, on whom the book and the program is based. And when we were endeavoring to maybe revamp her driving, I didn't take her keys away. She was on every board in town, very active socially, very philanthropic. And I said to her, you know, Dee, I said, you've done so much for so many. If these people want you to show up for a night event, don't you think they could at least send a car? Don't you think you've earned the right to be escorted and driven?
Absolutely.
And she said, you know, you're right. You're absolutely right. So then we got her to driving during the daylight hours only, and little by little by little.
Wow.
So I offer that.
Very effective.
Tricks of the trade. It'll be in the book.
We can't wait. We have another question. How does communication differ when on the phone and email? Which I think that's a good question because, you know, they can't see you.
Differ with whom, or just differ generically? Well, the phone, you have the opportunity to avail yourself of the person's emotional state. You know if somebody's smiling on the phone, you know if somebody's in a bad mood. There's so much more that touch. In fact, we just did this last night, a colleague and I, he was texting back and forth and finally said, you want to talk? And I picked up the phone, it's like, isn't this novel? Isn't this neat? You know, because frankly, my thumbs are wide and I can do 90 words a minute on a manual typewriter, but I have problems texting rapidly, so I don't do conversational text. On an email, everything is there. So if you use the wrong words, or if it comes across too long, too abrupt, unkind, it's there for posterity. With the words, they're ephemeral, they're there and they're gone. So it's important to be very clear, very concise with an email, and to read and reread.
And reread.
And reread. It depends upon what your purpose is.
Yeah, because a lot of times tone can be misconstrued.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hope that answers, that's a topic for discussion that could go on forever and ever and ever.
Yes, it could. So you did mention that you work with patients that have movement disorders.
Parkinson's, yes indeed.
Parkinson's.
Specifically Parkinson's, very active with the Parkinsons community.
And so can you tell us a little bit about your work in the community? I know that you have a couple of things going on.
We have lots of things going on. It's September, by the way. September is Fall Prevention Month, okay? And April was Parkinson's Awareness Month. So we wrote a rap song, and we delivered a rap song. Everybody got on board, and they all had their lines, because it's not just Parkinson's, it's any diagnosis. People don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And when the general public doesn't know what to do, they do nothing because they're embarrassed for fear of doing the wrong thing. They shy away.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
It's important to educate the general public and to let them know what they can do to help, to make things better.
Mm-hmm.
So this rap song was an effort to educate the general public on Parkinson's. And it was all about the word choice. When we're a welcoming group, a friendly crowd, we come together because we want to speak loud. And when people can't hear what you say, they assume you don't know. So that was also part. When people can't hear you, they assume you don't know. It's all up there, but the voice will go. If you give us a moment, we'll say the words, and we hope you'll wait, because we want to be heard. And we worked on gesture. We worked on facial expression, because, you know, with Parkinson's, you have that flat affect sometimes, that masked face. So and the most important thing is that I get like 20, 30 people 3 times a week.
Yeah.
I mean, we were in August, 20, 30 people showing up 3 times a week. We offer them 5 times a week. I do 3 sessions. It was just so exciting. They come because it's upbeat.
Yeah. I love that.
And we focus on what everybody can do.
Mm-hmm.
And we tease each other, and what happens in the communication club stays in the communication club. And we always say one for all and all for one.
I love that, and thank you so much for the rap.
And there's more where that came from.
So, your company, CESLC, LLC,
Right.
what other services do you provide? Can you tell our audience?
I can indeed. I do public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I provide services on voice, content, and delivery in the commercial sector for people who, it might be somebody who wants voice, power, and projection.
Wow.
It might be a company that's seeking employee engagement. They want to know how to get people revved up, especially now with COVID, to get them back together, to bring that continuity back and change the words they use so they can change the world, change their own world. So with professional speakers, or people aspiring to improve their presentation skills, I'll work on voice. I might help them tweak their content. Generally with the professional speakers, content is the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because most people, present company included, the issue is generally too much information. And it's trying to streamline things, keep things in a way that's palatable to the audience. You don't want to feed people with a fire hose. You don't want to gulping. You want them to be able to, you want them to come, you want them to know that they were there, why they were there, and you want them to know what they got from it when they left.
Mm-hmm.
So you want them to have something to carry away. You don't want them to be coughing and still trying to get it all down. So, and then I work on delivery. If people in small businesses, if they're trying to find a succinct way to talk about their businesses.
Okay.
When people ask me what I do, I say one-liners at a cocktail party. I help people talk to each other.
Okay.
And because you're always working for the same 3 words, tell me more.
Yeah, tell me more.
And you'll meet somebody at these elevator speeches, and it's like you can see the elevator doors closing and the mouth is still going, and they're going through the whole menu. It's like, I don't need all that, thank you, I'll call you, but you just need a little bit, and it's like an hors d'oeuvre, and if they want more, they'll come back.
So,
But you have to invite that. It's how you make people feel. It's the feeling that lingers after you leave the room with which people do business. And I find lead time is very often 2 years in the commercial sector, 2 or more.
2 or more years.
Mm-hmm. And with COVID now, we don't, even more, probably.
Yeah, most definitely.
Please email the rap on Parkinson's.
You should do the whole rap. How long is this rap? And what's the name of the rap?
It's called it's a Parkinson rap song.
Parkinson's rap.
It's a Parkinson rap song, absolutely. And they ended, the strongest line is, they end with, Parkinson's, it's what we have, not who we are.
That's strong.
That's strong, and everybody needs to remember that. No matter what's going on in life, it's an issue, but it doesn't define you. As they say, nobody should be judged on the worst thing they ever did in their lives.
Of course not. We're always evolving.
So I'll make sure you get the Parkinson's. It's on social media, by the way. It is on social media.
It is on social media?
We've got the captions and the pictures and everybody's gesturing, and it was lovely. It was quite an event. It was our maiden voyage.
Your maiden voyage.
There'll be more, we're planning. They won't be happy till we get a record deal.
So you mentioned a book, an upcoming book, Travels with My Aunt.
Travels with My Aunt to support the program, which has been in the works way too long. I must get that out because it has valuable information. It's based on a series of vignettes that I experienced. It talks about just about everything we go through, the different dementias, the behavior, and how to work with somebody who's experiencing what we call cognitive shift. And I go through a very thumbnail sketch, a very abbreviated a synopsis, an abbreviated outline of staging in terms of dementia and the things that are affected. When there's a financial issue, there might be repetitive behavior, something that, all the things that I wish I had back when I was caring for my aunt.
Well, I'm excited for it.
Thank you.
I'm excited for the book. Anything else we should know about what you're doing?
I'll let you
Before
know.
we close?
I'll let you know. I would like to leave you, this is the story I leave everyone with because I feel it's so important. My mother was a dancer. A lot of you know this. She was a professional dancer on stage at the age of 4. She was headlining at the age of 15. When I was born, I was immediately put into ballet at the age of 2, not because they had grandiose ideas for me, but I was paralyzed at birth. My chest was crushed, they broke both arms, and it wasn't a good scene, and they wanted me to have bilateral arm movement. So they put me in a dance class. I was very shy,
I can't believe
talk.
that.
And so they took me out and put me back in at the age of 7 at the conservatory. I was still very shy, but now I was tall and gawky and miserable. And I didn't like dancing. I just felt self-conscious. So my mother sat through this concert, this recital, the first recital for 60 minutes, all 60 minutes, as only a mother can. I denigrated the family. I gave new definition to the word horrendous. I was awful. So when the concert ended, the recital ended, we walked out, and I looked up at her, and I asked her how it was, it being my dancing. She knew I knew, she knew that I knew. There were no secrets. She looked down at me with her eyes twinkling, her cover girl smile, and she said to me, Susan, your potential for improvement is infinite. And that's the thought I'd like to leave.
I love that.
Our potential for improvement is infinite. All of us, every day, in everything that we do, and each and every day, we have a chance to make someone else happy and to lift them up with the words we use.
Thank you so much for joining us. It was such a powerful discussion. It was so enlightening.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day. Until next time.
Thank you very much.